Welcome everybody to workshop C, supporting the parent-child relationship. For those of you who, for everybody to use the Slido, you need to switch rooms now. So you go to the drop-down bar where you choose the rooms for today's conference, and you choose workshop C to be able to post your questions and comments. Like we did in the workshops, the previous workshops, we will be taking or having a panel discussion after all presenters have finished with their presentations. So we won't take questions after each presentation, but in the end, the speakers are going to sit down here with us and we're going to talk to them about their interesting talks. When you pose a question or a comment, you can either name it by the presenter's name or the number of the, so it was like the second presentation, and I want to ask a question about the second presentation or the third talk or something like that. You can put it in your question or comment so that we know if it's directed at a particular speaker, but if you're just making a general comment about all of the things we've learned today at the workshop, you can just pose your question or comment in a general way. One of our speakers today is unfortunately was not able to arrive in Iceland in time for the conference. So he will be with us through the internet on this big screen behind me. But first of all, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, who is Nina Thomsen. Nina is a child psychologist at the Unit for Child Healthcare in Stockholm, Sweden. She is passionate about interventions to strengthen children's access to committed caregivers and co-parenting. Nina also develops material for Save the Children to promote mental health of children and works clinically with parents-to-be and younger children and their parents. Nina's talk is entitled, "What About the Other Parent? The Importance of Including Non-Birthing Parents in Infant and Child Healthcare." Nina's presentation will discuss individual health visits that are currently offered to the non-birthing parent within the National Child Healthcare Program in Sweden when their children are about 3 to 5 months old. Traditionally, the focus in infant and child healthcare has been on the mother, but research shows that the quality of the co-parenting relationship has an impact on children's health and well-being. The non-birthing parent's engagement in parenting has implications for the co-parenting relationship as well as directly for the child's health and well-being. The aim of the Swedish healthcare services is precisely to support these processes. So please welcome Nina Thomsen to the stage.
So, a quarter of Sweden's infants and preschool children live in Stockholm, and up to 99% of all the families with children up to the age of 5 participate in the national program for the Well Baby Clinics. I'm using the term Well Baby Clinics. There can be some child healthcare centers, is the same thing, right? So that makes them an important part in the overall health work. The Well Baby Clinics are nurse-led, with addition to various specialists such as pediatricians and well baby psychologists. And these nurses are to an enormous extent female. Parental support has gradually become one of the most important assignments for Well Baby Clinics, and in order to offer parental support, we obviously need to meet the parents. But though we reach almost all the children, we have mainly met with the mothers, and the fathers have participated to a much lesser extent and been offered a lot less parental support. And they have also felt excluded. An important factor when it comes to inequality is that fathers with immigrant background and low socioeconomic status receives particularly less of the parental support. And to reach more fathers, there was a project started with the individual visits for the non-birthing parents in 2013. And this, the first purpose of this project was to include fathers to a greater extent, but also to reach other co-parents. And the visit is directed at all parents, regardless of gender or biological ties to the child. But today I will talk about fathers, and I will use the term father visits, since the work I'm described today have had fathers in focus, and there are other concerns for other non-birthing parents that I will not be addressing today. Individual visits per se for parents is nothing new at Swedish well baby clinics. For the past 25 years, birthing mothers have been offered a visit where screening for new mothers' mental health, according to EPDS, is conducted. Whereas the father visit became a part of the national program in 2019. I'm happy to be here today to share our work and the lessons we have learned from implementing this visit. This process has not been without challenges. Over the past 2 years, I've met very many nurses during education and supervision who have shared their thoughts on both setbacks and progress that I will be addressing today. The father visit is included in a national model for early parental support offered to all families. And the model includes 4 visits. First, there's the home visit, within a week of returning home from the delivery ward. This is a joint visit for both parents. Then there's a joint visit at the well baby clinic. Both parents are generally welcome to all visits, but in regards to these 2 visits in the model, the nurse actively invites both parents. And often both parents spontaneously take part in the home visit, which makes it a good starting point for creating a norm around joint participation. Then there's the mother visit when the child is 6 to 8 weeks old, and the father visit when the child is 3 to 5 months old. And the father also receives follow-up questions regarding depressive symptoms, according to Woolley or EPDS, upon indication, so no screening. Fathers run a similar risk of mental health problems in connection with becoming a parent. And mental health problems in fathers are associated with the same kind of negative impact on the child-parent relationship, the co-parent, and co-parent equalities. During the father visit, the nurse uses a specific conversation guide. The guide contains questions for reflection in 4 domains: the child, parenting, family life, and the parent himself. Nurses express that the content of the conversation is relatively similar to conversations with mothers. Parents mainly talk about their child, its ability, development, health, and personality. But fathers also talks about things that the nurse are less accustomed to, about striving to meet the needs of both their child, their partner, and at work. One nurse stated that the new father struggles with the puzzle of life, work, family, free time, while the new mother is in the bubble with her child. Not so much a gender difference as a situational difference. It's common for fathers to talk about the relationship to their partner and how it's changed since the child's birth. Many fathers perceive that the mother is tired and stressed and look for ways to relieve her. And one common challenge that fathers address is that he perceives that the child prefers the mother, and that makes him insecure about his role. The visit offers an opportunity to express any feelings of being rejected, and for the nurse to confirm the father's importance as a parent and support in how he can offer his care, so that he doesn't stand aside looking at the child over the shoulder of the mother. The child perspective when it comes to including fathers is thus not about equality between men and women, but the child's right to close relationships and care from both parents, and that relationships and quality in relationships is about invested time. A strong motive for these initial joint visits in the model is that research on co-parenting clearly states that cooperation between caregivers in regards to the child, and this is usually parents, has a powerful impact on infants and toddlers' socio-emotional development, and that fathers' involvement in the early care of the child predicts quality in co-parenting. Many nurses emphasize the importance of including the father already at the home visit. One nurse said that when we present this during the home visit, we light a spark. We raise expectations that the father will be involved and participate. The joint visits provide opportunity for the nurse to support the parents to be mindful of their co-parenting relation, and a chance to observe the dynamics between the parents in regards to the child and to offer adequate support. During the home visit, the nurse also talks about family violence, and at the individual visits, both parents are asked routine questions, as you can see here. And contrary to many nurses' initial concern that raising the issue of violence would make fathers feel identified as potential perpetrators, it has contributed to the conversations and to the relationships. Talking about violence largely captures other stresses in the family in addition to ongoing violence. One father shared that the mother had been exposed herself as a child, and now she didn't dare to leave the child alone with another adult. Another nurse was completely surprised when a parent told her that he was afraid of himself because he didn't know what to do when he got angry. She had no idea he was in trouble before they had this conversation, and now she had the opportunity to help him. Overall, raising such a difficult and at the same time important issue contributes to the parents' confidence in the nurse. Given today's knowledge of children's needs and the relatively high level of striving for gender equality in Sweden, we were somewhat surprised of how much resistance we faced implementing the father visit. It's been a long journey since the first project started by Malin Bergström and others, during which we have followed up on experiences and attitudes of both nurses and fathers. The vast majority of nurses express a positive attitude when it comes to including both parents. But at the same time, there's been a great variety in the pace and degree of implementation of the father visit. Additional education and supervision have been offered to a great extent, and listening to the nurses have been crucial. Some nurses have first expressed that they don't need educational support in regards to the visit, which in itself is seen as unnecessary because they perceive that they meet so many fathers anyway. At the same time, it has been greatly appreciated once they have received help with clarification regarding the purpose of the visit and the work method. Negative attitude and the argument that the father visit is not needed can be seen as expressions for uncertainty and lack of knowledge. Well baby clinics have traditionally been a place for mothers and children, and reflecting on norms and raising awareness of how attitudes and strategies can be based on different expectations of fathers and mothers, as well as parents from different backgrounds, have been essential during the implementation process. It's common that the father visit is devalued and deprioritized. Nurses express that they feel unsure if the father is really interested, while they take the mother's interest in talking about her child and about parenthood more or less for granted. Nurses' lack of confidence when it comes to inviting the father can have particularly negative effects, since the father, on his part, often are less confident in his role in relation to the nurse and more dependent on her commitment to participate. Nurses sharing and reflecting during education have enabled a positive development, where change in attitude and new strategies from nurses have motivated more fathers to participate. As one nurse bravely shared, "I did invite the father, but I was happy if he said no." Now I mean what I say when I say I want to meet him for a one-on-one conversation. And when it comes to immigrant fathers with low socioeconomic status, nurses perceive that they don't have time for the visit due to insecure employment conditions. And these fathers are also described as less motivated and less comfortable with participating. And even though this reflects real challenges, a negative generalization can also stand in the way of the work, and some nurses have completely given up. They don't even book the father visit. And nurses' commitment gives results, even though challenges remains. So, what did work? These are some factors that we have found particularly important. That the visit includes all parents as part of the national program. That the father's participation is presented as something that the nurse expects, rather than something in particular voluntary or as something extraordinary. That the father visit is included in a model for early parenting support, since the first 2 joint visits in a model is important for the father visit in terms of both establishing relationships and raising important topics. And the use of the conversation guide, which offers support to the nurse at the same time as it assures fathers that this is part of the basic program and the nurse is acting professionally. Continued education and supervision in small groups have been crucial to enable positive development. And last but not least, emphasis on child focus strengthens motivation from both nurses and fathers, as opposed to, for example, focus on mental health in parents. As one nurse said to me, it's not about equality per se, but about responsiveness to what the child needs. It becomes easier to motivate for the father visits and father's participation when I myself understand the importance of early attachment to both mom and dad. Once implemented, nurses and fathers often describe the visit as something totally natural and positive. Even nurses who have previously made an effort to include both parents express that the father visit more clearly conveys values and expectations of equal parenting. And fathers express that the visit makes them feel confirmed as parents, in contrast to how they usually see themselves in the eyes of authorities. Being addressed as a primary caregiver is in itself an essential parental support. And sometimes this visit is even the father's and the child's first trip out on their own, and thus of extra great importance. And many mothers long for their father's participation and express relief when he is invited. The nurses describe a better relationship and understanding of the father that broadens her understanding of the family and thereby the child's life space. For example, the nurse meets a mother who expressed sadness and disappointment because she feels left alone with much of the responsibility for the child. This we all have heard of, right? In the conversation with the father, the nurse understands that he feels abandoned because he perceives the mother as angry and doesn't feel that he has access to the child. As in this case, access to both parents' perspectives can be crucial in order to offer parental support that is adequate. Overall, the visit has contributed to shifting the focus from one parent and one dyadic relationship to the child and the child's relationships to both parents and to co-parenting. And finally, I'm finishing up in very good time. Implementation of the father visit has been an important step for us in bridging the gap between knowledge and practice. For me and my colleagues, the process has increased our knowledge of challenges and opportunities in the work of including all parents that we take with us forward, and are happy to share with others who want to embark on similar projects. So thank you very much for listening, and I haven't written out references and stuff, you've seen that, so just email me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina, for a wonderful presentation. Now, I'd like to welcome our next speaker, who is Mere Skovgaard Verva. I practiced saying his name during the break, who will be giving her talk, The Alarm Distress Baby Scale and Understanding Your Baby in Denmark. You should all be familiar with Mere from our morning sessions, where she was one of our keynote speakers, but she is a professor of clinical child psychology and early intervention, as well as director of the Center for Early Intervention and Family Studies at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. Her long-standing research focus has been on basic and applied research on parenting and early childhood mental health in both normative and high-risk population, combining a variety of research methods, including observations, experiments, and psychological assessment. Mere's presentation will be a more detailed understanding of the Alarm Distress Baby Scale, which is used for identifying persistent social withdrawal in infants aged 2 to 24 months as an indicator of emotional distress in young children. She will discuss how early identification of risk using the ADBB and how the ADBB observation in primary care provides a unique context for health visitors supporting parents and their infants. Welcome, Dr. Mere Verva.
So thank you for inviting me to also speak at this workshop. I'm very honored to have two presentations. I will be repeating a little bit about the ADBB that I talked about this morning, but what I really would like to focus on in this workshop is actually how we have also developed the Understanding Your Baby program to be a universal parenting intervention that is used within the context of doing an ADBB observation. So that's sort of in regard to supporting, of course, the parent-child relationship during the first year of the child. So as I also said already this morning, we really wanted to put socio-emotional development of the infant on the agenda in primary care in Denmark, because traditionally the primary focus has been on weighing the baby, measuring the length of the baby, talking about nutrition, sleeping habits, and so on, whereas there has not been a systematic and standardized focus on the mental well-being of the child and the socio-emotional development of the child. So in Denmark, we don't have well baby clinics, but we have a very well-established home visiting program for during the first year of the baby's life, where the family have a visit around 4 to 5 times during the first year. And I call them home visitors, but I guess they are educated the same way in the Nordic countries almost. They are actually highly educated nurses. So they're first nurses, and then they do 1.5 years of a special education, qualifying them to work with infants. The home visiting program in Denmark has really a very well reputation. All the families love the health visitors, and they have a very big trust in the health visitors. And they visit almost 98% of all families with a newborn baby in Denmark. So in that sense, it is really well established. So as I also said this morning, until now, the socio-emotional development of the infant has not been a specific topic during the visits. Of course, the health visitor has been talking about relationship and meeting the infant's needs and that stuff, but actually having a situation where this is what we are talking about right now has not been part of the program so far. And that was why we introduced the Alarm Distress Baby Scale as this observational tool that the health visitors use to observe the baby on these 8 items when, I'll just go back to that one later, when she has the baby in her hands. So you have the 8 behavioral items, and the ADBB was developed to be used in a variety of clinical routine examinations of babies, where you have, as a clinician, the baby in your hands. The 8 behavioral items that you see in the blue area are all rated from 0 to 4, and you keep, it's actually not that easy to do an ADBB observation because you have to have the baby in your hands for around 5 to 10 minutes, and then you have to keep track of the baby's behavior on these 8 items, and then afterwards you score the baby. And you score each of the items 0 to 4, where a higher score indicates a worry. So that means higher scores and a higher total score reflect higher levels of social withdrawal. The cutoff of 5 has been validated in quite a number of studies in different countries, but this is something that we will also look into in Denmark, because our findings so far may suggest that a cutoff of 5 in a population like the Danish population may be too high. It's also important to state that if you have a positive score on an infant using the ADBB, you have to repeat the ADBB observation within a period of 1 to 2 weeks to find out whether it was sort of a phenomenon that would pass on, or whether it's actually reflecting social withdrawal within the infant. I'll just go back to this one because we focus on social withdrawal because we know that it is a risk factor for infant socio-emotional development. We know that it is a risk factor for both diminished cognitive and language development, diminished social and communicative development, attachment disorders, behavioral disorders, as well as it may indicate autism spectrum disorders in a very early age. So as I said this morning, one of the aims of the Copenhagen Infant Mental Health Project was actually, first of all, to develop a training program for the health visitors to certify them in the clinical use of the ADBB in primary care practice. So the training program that we developed consists of a 2-day seminar, 3 hours, 3 multiplied 2 hours of supervision, and then in the end, the health visitors have to do a reliability test that they have to pass. So that means that they have to code a specific number of videos correct, so that we are sure that everybody is seeing the same, and that actually also that the health visitor, when she's visiting the family and doing the ADBB, can feel certain that this is also what my colleague would actually score this baby. The training program is really determined on that the health visitors get hands-on coding from video clips already from day one, because this is what it's all about. It is the training in seeing things the same way. And every time we start a new class in the ADBB, we warn the health visitors that they may be a little bit afraid, because it turns out that in the beginning they score quite differently. I don't know, are anyone here trained in the ADBB? One? Yep. It is actually, quite scary how different we evaluate the social behavior of young infants. And that is sort of the whole argument of using an instrument where we all get trained and can document that we use the method in the right way and that we code in the same way. Or else, I think, it will be really the gut feeling of each individual health visitor or psychologist, for that matter, which I think is not fair to the families and the infants. So this was about the ADBB, and as I explained to you this morning, it's been a really success story because the word has spread, and the health visitors around Denmark, they really appreciate getting this method into their practice. It makes them feel more confident in speaking with the parents, and it makes them feel more confident in actually identifying children showing social withdrawal. But what we also learned from the trainings in the Alarm Distress Baby Scale was that the health visitors expressed to us, but we actually need more knowledge about socio-emotional development during the first year, and we need a bigger vocabulary to actually talk with the parents about what we see and how we should understand it. So they wanted to enlarge their vocabulary and to support their ability to describe the infant's socio-emotional cues, and do that with the parents and together in a dialogue with the parents while they're having the baby in their hands and talking, so to speak, about the behavior of the infant. And we wanted, of course, we were like, yes, we will be there, we will do this, let's do it together, because for us it's really important also that the knowledge that is then being shared in this situation is actually the knowledge that we have that has been documented in research studies. So what the health visitors are doing now is that they're doing the alarm distress baby scale observation, and while they're doing it, they're sharing research-based knowledge with the parents, what it looks like, and what the parents can do to meet the infant's needs. So the whole idea was also that the health visitors explained to us that the ADBB observational situation actually creates a unique standardized setting for having this systematic sharing of knowledge and the dialogue with the parents about the infant's socio-emotional expressions. And it's important to say that the program that we then developed in collaboration with the health visitors is a universal intervention. So that means that the health visitors deliver this to all families whenever they do an ADBB observation, and not just in the cases where the ADBB gives rise to a concern. And we were able to establish this project based on a grant from the Nordic Foundation, and we formulated the following aims. The overall aim is, of course, to support infant socio-emotional development by increasing parents' abilities at perceiving, understanding, and sensitively responding to their infant's socio-emotional signals during the first year of life. And we wanted to do that via 3 parts of the project. Together and in collaboration with health visitors, we wanted to develop the Understanding Your Baby intervention, and it was really important for us as researchers and as psychologists that we did this in a very tight collaboration with the health visitors, because those were the guys that were going to use it in the home visiting program. So we wanted also to train 230 health visitors in using the Understanding Your Baby program, and they come from 10 municipalities spread around Denmark. And then, of course, we want to evaluate the implementation, the feasibility and acceptability of Understanding Your Baby in primary care, but this is something that is going on. So what I'm presenting here now is work in progress. Another central part of Understanding Your Baby has been to develop a video library and putting Understanding Your Baby on the social media platforms of Facebook and Instagram. So we do this. The video library is aimed for both parents and health professionals, and it's accessible for all. But of course, we want to do research on the things that we do as well. So we are in parallel evaluating the parental experience of using the video library and also the SoMe platforms. And lastly, but of course very important, we want to test the effects of Understanding Your Baby and as a universal intervention aimed at, and in the study we will only be looking at first-time parents in the 10 municipalities, and we will be using a controlled parallel group design, comparing Understanding Your Baby to Care as Usual. 1,300 infants and their parents will be included in the study. So these are the materials that have been developed and now are being used in the study. First of all, we developed the Understanding Your Baby manual, which is the green one, which is the book that is also the book that is used for the training program. Then there's the online video library and the SoMe platforms. And then there's the ADBB dialogue card. And I will now just shortly tell you about each of the elements. We developed the training program for Understanding Your Baby to be quite similar to the ADBB training program because it worked so well as it did. So it consists of a 2-day seminar, 2 times 3 hours of supervision, and then the health visitors are sent a video where they have to do a written assignment explaining on how would you share knowledge with the parents in regard to the behavior that you see on this infant based on the ADBB observation. So that means they should, of course, code the ADBB in their mind, and then they should pick out central items where they think it's important to share knowledge with the parents about the infant at this specific age. And as we did, and as we do in the ADBB training, there will be hands-on coding from day one in using the Understanding Your Baby. So the manual looks like this, and this is the first page. But it sort of includes, it does include 4 age-specific chapters that includes an overview of research-based knowledge about infant socio-emotional development and needs across 4 age groups, which are also the age groups where families in Denmark normally have a home visit. So we have an age group of 0 to 2 months, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and 8 to 12 months in regard to 5 of the central behavior areas inspired by items from the ADBB. So that includes facial expressions, eye contact, general level of activity, vocalizations, and relationship and attraction of attention. Furthermore, and this is again based on the dialogue and the collaboration that we had with the health visitors, we have also included 3 chapters focusing on more general themes that we know from the health visitors' practice are important to parents during the first year. That is infant crying, no surprise. We have a chapter on being good enough, that the health visitors are really explicit about, that parents are not expected to be perfect, that the perfect parent is actually characterized by being good enough. And then we have included a chapter on screen time in families with young children, to talk with them about the existing current evidence research there is out there about the risks of using and having screen time in families. So this is what is called the ADBB dialogue card, and it consists of a front page and a back page. And the front page is actually mandatory for the health visitors to use. So what we expect from the health visitor is that just as she brings out the weight, or she brings out, and I say she because we only have female health visitors in Denmark, 0 men, almost like this conference. But just as she brings out her measuring tape for measuring the length of the baby, the health visitor is expected to bring out this card and put it on the table and say, so now I will be examining your baby's social behavior, and we'll be talking about socio-emotional development. And then they will actually set aside time and have a specific focus on it, which I know is a big challenge for health visitors when they come into families, because there can be so many things going on in a family. They're almost to be kicked out of their apartment, they haven't slept all night, there's not enough money, all these things. But this is actually, now we're talking about this. And so you can see it again focuses on the items that are also described in the manual, so that the health visitor has the recent research-based knowledge about these items and can share her knowledge with the parents. I'll just skip the back page. The back page is used for if you want to sort of make it more concrete, that how you can advise the parents, but this is not mandatory to use for the health visitors. So the video library and the SoMe platforms, I think we're actually very proud of developing this, because we have a number of videos categorized into the 4 same age groups again. And these videos are of course developed to inform infants or parents or health professionals about socio-emotional development of the infant. We have real parent-infant interactions, and then we have a speaker exemplifying what the infant on the video is showing and what socio-emotional need that express, and how the parent is meeting that need of the infant. All videos have English subtitles, and we do the same thing on the SoMe platforms, where parents can find research-based knowledge, and we also engage them in Q&As. But I will warn you that having SoMe platforms is like a monster that you have to feed, if not every day, then every week. So it's really something that is taking up a lot of our time. So this is what we expect the health visitors to do. She should use the ADBB dialogue card. She should engage in a dialogue with the parents about the socio-emotional development. She can use these 3 questions as guidelines. What is it that the baby does? And what is he or she trying to tell us with his or her behavior? How can you as a parent support your baby's development? And why is this important? And then she should inform the parents of the video library and the SoMe platforms. And of course, the parents can choose not to use it. So the future of understanding your baby is that hopefully we'll have our protocol paper published soon. We will finish our data collection for the whole project by November this year, and then we will start analyzing outcomes, which we're very excited about. We know that, apropos Nina's talk, that the fathers have expressed that putting up the dialogue card has been very helpful for them, because it makes it very concrete and transparent what is all this that the health visitor is talking about when she's talking about mental health. Also, they've been very, very happy about the video library. But we've also published 2 papers along the way, one on how mothers actually are affected by and supported by SoMe platforms on parenting. Or does it have a negative effect? We look into in that paper. And also we've been looking at the amount of screen time during the first year of the child's life. And I think that was my last slide. Yes, it was.
Thank you so much, Mette. Our last speaker is joining us from beyond, from the internet. Hans Bugge Bergsund has a master's degree in psychology and is a PhD student conducting a feasibility study of attachment and biobehavioral catch-up, or ABC as it's called, in Norway. His main research interests are attachment, parent-child interactions, and implementation of an evidence-based program for infants and toddlers. His talk is entitled The Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up ABC Program in Norway, where he will discuss the attachment and biobehavioral catch-up ABC model, which is a parenting program based on home visits that helps parents respond sensitively to their young children, support their development, and build healthy parent-child relationships. He is going to discuss new research findings from the US and Norway, and discuss participants' and clinicians' experience with the program and insights gathered from implementation of the program in Norway. Welcome, Hans.
Thank you. Yes, hope you can all see my slides. Let's see. Yeah, so I am Hans Bergsund. I'm, as you mentioned, Sigrun, I'm a PhD student at the Regional Center for Child and Adolescent Mental Health in Eastern and Southern Norway at the section for infants and young children. So the topic of my PhD thesis is, as you mentioned, the attachment and biobehavioral catch-up, which is ABC for short. And I'll start by just briefly outlining my presentation, so you'll know all what I'll be speaking about. First, as Sigrun touched upon, I will start by explaining what ABC is and what it consists of, and the different kinds of versions of ABC. Then I'll let you briefly know about what we know already from ABC. As you mentioned, the research from the US, it's mainly US based, so that's what I'll cover in the main part. And also our experiences from Norway. And when I say experiences, I actually mean the research project that we did, the feasibility study. And then fourth and finally, I'll briefly conclude and give you some recommendations at the end. So let's see. Firstly, what is ABC? Well, as I said, ABC stands for Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up. It is an evidence-based program for children who have experienced early adversity. So that can be all kinds of maltreatment, neglect, abuse, all these kinds of things. The initial program was developed for foster children in the United States, but has since been used with international adoptees, with women who have been receiving help for substance abuse issues, and generally for the Child Protective Services in the US. And the program consists of 10 weekly home visits, so it's quite brief, only 1 hour per session, and it's delivered by a specially trained parent coach, as they're known. In our study, they were child welfare workers who were trained and provided the ABC. And it's also another important aspect of the ABC and how it is delivered is that it's delivered, as I said, in the home, but also with the parent and the child together. And they're provided video feedback, which is probably quite explanatory, but I'll say it anyway, which is all the home visit sessions are filmed in their entirety. And then video clips from those sessions are used in subsequent sessions to help explain to the parents what kind of behaviors we're talking about and highlight particular situations that are important to the method. Yes, and there are 2 versions. As you can see, there's ABC Infant, which is from 6 to 24 months. And then there's ABC Toddler, which is from 24 to 48 months. Now, ABCI, as we call it, the first one, is the one that has received the most research and the most evidence is based on this program. So I'll focus mainly on that in the rest of the presentation, but you should know that there is a second one called ABC Toddler as well. Also, the research project that I'm gonna tell you about from Norway is also based on the ABCI version. So the ABC program consists of 3 main aims, and these are primarily aimed at the behaviors that we want to improve in parents. And the first one is what we refer to as nurturance, which is defined as sensitivity and responsiveness when the child is distressed. So to put it in different kind of language, if the child is feeling stressed or scared or is upset in some way, the parent then responds appropriately by comforting and soothing the child and giving that child the response it needs. And sort of the challenge with this, obviously, is that many children, at least in this population, have had difficult caregiving or caregiver relationships in the past, and so they may not respond or they may not elicit that caregiving behavior that naturally. So they may turn away, for instance, or they may not give the caregiver that signal that they expect for them to receive when they're supposed to comfort their child. So part of nurturance, this aspect of ABC is helping parents understand the child may need your nurturance even though they don't express that need for comfort and soothing. And then the second one is known as following the lead, and it refers to allowing the child to take charge of the situation, especially during play, and then to respond to that behavior. I've used this image because I just like the face of the mother and the child in interaction together, because it shows the child doing something that's not what you're supposed to do, obviously, with this kind of tool. So one reaction from the mother could be like, don't touch mommy's nose like that. You should use it on the paper, right? But instead, she's smiling and she's responding with delight, as we would say in ABC, is that she's reacting with positive emotions to the child's behavior instead of correcting them. And then the third and final aim of the ABC is what is called non-frightening behavior. And this concerns helping parents to recognize that some behaviors may be frightening or overwhelming to children, even though they may not appear that obviously scary or frightening to the parent, but to the child, some things can be overwhelming, like playing with a toy very intensely or making loud noises or things like that. So the rationale behind this is that even if you do the first 2 aims well and the parent follows the child's lead and provides nurturance, they may not necessarily they may not have really positive consequences if the parent is still frightening towards the child. So they need to have also act in non-frightening ways for the other outcomes to really work. So, oh yes, before I go on to the next slide, I just want to also briefly mention that one important aspect of the ABC intervention is what we call in-the-moment commenting, which is basically just the parent coach, so the person who delivers the intervention, when they're present with the family, they comment on what the parent is doing. They're doing it live and doing it as it happens. Yeah. The point of this is that they highlight what the parent accomplishes rather than highlighting things they're doing wrong. So they're not saying, now you're doing something frightening. They're more focused on saying, oh, that's a great job of following the child's lead, for instance. And all of these behaviors, including the commenting, is video recorded and then coded, and then those codings are used to provide feedback. So when the coaches are receiving training, they are themselves receiving feedback on their own behaviors. Yes, that was just briefly on that. And now to the research and what we know about ABC. So you all probably at least seen the report. I recommend everybody read it because it's a really good overview, very comprehensive summary of interventions and tests available for this population in the Nordic countries. And the reason I bring this up is that because ABC stands out as one of the most highly rated interventions available in Nordic countries. And the reason that it has a level 3 of evidence is because there are many RCTs carried out on the ABC for different kinds of populations. Like I said, for foster care, for child protective services, for international adoptees, and so on. And that's why it has such a high rating. And these RCTs have been conducted on different outcomes. So there's attachment patterns, there's emotional regulations, there's stress, physiological stress levels, so cortisol, normalization of cortisol over time. And there's also quite a few follow-ups of these RCTs. So they can see that actually the ABC has had a positive impact not only on a single point in time, but over long periods of time or several years, and they even extend into other areas. So for instance, they've seen improvements in vocabulary, for instance, and inhibitory control, and so on. So it's really a well-founded evidence-based program. But the challenge, especially what we were focused on when we started our study, was that there are no RCTs conducted outside of the US. So there are starting to be some studies being conducted, but so far no RCTs, at least that I know of. So our study was sort of a way to answer this need for a non-US study. And we want to do a feasibility study before conducting an RCT. So my project in this presentation concerns that feasibility study, which we recently finished. And our main topic was how can you implement ABC successfully in Norwegian child welfare services? And if so, are there certain adjustments that are needed? And what we did was we collected data from 29 parents from, from 8 child welfare service leaders, and then from 11 family coaches. So that is the workers at those agencies. And what we did was we did observations. So like I mentioned, we used video recordings of home visit sessions, and these were both on parent behavior. So we coded the quality of parenting behaviors, and we also coded the quality of parent-coach fidelity. So by fidelity, most of you know this, but I'll say it anyways. Fidelity refers to the coach's adherence to the method, whether they carried out the ABC program as intended. And we also I did phone interviews. So I called a selection of these participants, so both leaders, parent coaches, and parents, and asked them about their experiences with ABC in Norway. So I'll start by just briefly showing you the results from the observations. And as you can see here, this graph shows the development over time of the parent coach behavior. So that is the live commenting that I talked about previously. And as you can see, the graph here shows the line going upwards over the course of 30 home visit sessions. So that were 3 families that were coached by one single parent coach. These are from all parent coaches. And then as you can see, they improved quite substantially. The requirement from the ABC manual is that they comment at least 1 comment per minute, which sounds like quite a lot, but it's not actually that much when you sit there in the situation. And as you can see, then the line begins below the 1 line. So 1 on the y-axis is 1 comment per minute, and about home visit 10 on the x-axis there, you can see that they they cross that threshold, they are able to fulfill that requirement of 1 comment per minute by about 10 home visit sessions. And the reason all this is important is because we know from previous research that the quality of parent, coach, or clinician fidelity, that has a large impact on the family outcomes. So we'll see the next slide. We saw this reflected here because we see that though the line is not as steep, there's still a significant improvement for parents. So this graph shows parenting quality, or more specifically, parenting sensitivity. So sensitive responsiveness combined with low levels of or reversed scores of parent intrusiveness. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of variation, but there is a clear improvement over time. And then let's see, I'll try to summarize in the time I have left the findings from our qualitative study from the interviews. And in total, we had 4 main themes. And the first themes that I wanted to present was a relationship with families. And by that, I mean the relationship between the parent coach, so the child welfare worker, and the families. And now, a big challenge for the child welfare service, at least in Norway, and I expect many other countries, is that you have a lot of resistance. You have families who are fearful, who are really skeptical towards or even distrust child welfare workers. And that is a challenge when you want to implement a program, when you want to provide an intervention. And what was perceived as an advantage of the ABC was that it helped the coaches improve their relationship with the families over above than what they would normally. And what the parent coaches and the families thought was the reason for this was that you have a really strong strength-based focus in the ABC. So you, as I mentioned previously, instead of focusing very much on everything the parent does wrong, you focus a lot on what they're doing right. So in the ABC language, they would celebrate what the parent is doing right. So everything is, yay, great, excellent. And that seems to be working. You're sort of counteracting that fear and that distrust. And by the end, many parents said that they felt really close to their parent coach, and some even said that they could talk to their parent coach about everything. So yeah, it seemed to really work. And then the second theme was intervention focus. And by that, I mean what the ABC program targets. So for instance, one of the main, or the main thing that the ABC targets is the parent-child relationship. And so some coaches, for instance, they talked about how this was sort of a challenge because many families have complex problems. So some families have issues with sleep, with meal times, with scheduling, all these sorts of things that are not related to the parent-child relationship. And so improving the parent-child relationship could sometimes seem like sort of a limited, tiny sliver of the big scope they had to deal with. But on the other hand, they also said that it was really nice having that small sliver of focus, because then they could concentrate on one thing instead of having an ocean of problems and things they had to deal with. And another important issue they also mentioned was that many of them struggled with recruiting sufficient families. And the reason they believed that was because they didn't have enough children in the age range 6 months to 2 years. They often were a little bit older, and so they meant that the narrow age group of the ABC was an important limitation, because otherwise they would have been able to help more families. And another theme was that of capacity. So mainly referring to the amount of time and work they had available. And coaches, for instance, described their work lives as really busy and unpredictable. Parents talked about being stressed a lot of the time because they had difficulty combining the ABC sessions with another way, otherwise difficult life. And leaders were concerned that training for the ABC program took much of the time for parent coaches, and they would have liked them to spend it on other things. However, I think most of them agreed when they were thinking back on it that this was probably due to the coaches being in training. So a lot of the time they used was spent on receiving feedback from their counselors, for instance, and preparing videos and things that they would not be required to do once they were finished with the training phase. Yeah, I'll just skip ahead. And then final, and perhaps the biggest theme was how they all talked about how they noticed a change in behavior, that is parent behavior mainly, and how coaches and leaders especially talked about how this change in parents was really noticeable. They improved substantially, partially because they were seeing videos of them and they could see like from one video to the next improvements, but also because of the live commenting, the ITM commenting that I talked about. Like you could make a comment and then you would hear or you would see the response immediately from the parent. And I think it was one parent who said that they really liked the program because it was more surface than depth. And by that, they meant that it was, to put it in research terms, it was more behaviorally focused than cognitively focused. So the coach, when they're commenting on something physical that the parent is doing right now, instead of commenting on some abstract topic or talking about their past relationships or things like that. There is a small part of ABC that is devoted to talking about past relationships, but the main part is very behavioral. So what the coaches also talked about was how they liked that this was very suitable for families who were had limited language skills, for instance, like with multicultural backgrounds. They often have difficulties understanding when they started talking about abstract themes, and that ABC was quite easy to understand. And this was also true for families with limited intellectual capacity, because it was so clear. You said, now you're doing this, and then the parent immediately understood what the topic was about. So let's see. Final slide, the conclusions. So as we hope you can see, now take in mind that this is a pre-post study, a qualitative study. There's no RCT here, so we can't say anything certain about cause and effect, but there seems to be a clear indication of improvement from the findings that we see, that they talk about it in interviews, and we also see a positive development over time. So there seems to be clear improvement here in parenting quality. And yes, and as I also mentioned, the ABC addresses important needs in the child welfare service. So for instance, many coaches said that finally we have something to offer these families, because we have nothing or very little to offer families with young children. And another problem, of course, as I mentioned, is the lack of, or the amount of distrust and fear faced by many of these child welfare workers. And so by having something that sort of counteracts that is really also welcome in the child welfare service. And also, as I mentioned, families who struggle with intellectual functioning or language skills, they may also find ABC more easy to comprehend because it's so behavioral focus. But
Hans, we
some
have,
barriers should still be
completed
considered
our
if you're
time
considering
to-
implementing this in your country, such as the fact that it takes quite a lot of time to implement, and families with very young children. Sorry, yes. I'm going over time, I guess.
Thank you so much, Hans.
Do you
want to add something in conclusion?
Sure.
We're just about to start the panel discussion, but you can have one sentence if you have it.
Yes, I will. So there seems to be clear improvements. That's one thing that can be said, but there still are some adjustments, like the thing with capacity and also the narrow age group. I would really consider that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to welcome Mere and Nina again to the stage. And Hans, you will join us as well in the panel.
Sure, yes.
Wonderful. So we have a lot of questions for you guys. Thanks for all your very interesting talks. The first question is for Mere. When ADBB results give high scores and raise worry, what is recommended for parents? How is it followed up?
Er der lyd? Okay. So this is a very good question, because this is, of course, why we are using the ADBB, is to identify kids where we may be worried. So one of the very specific points that we also have when we do the ADBB training is to talk very often it's Danish municipalities sending all their health visitors to be trained at one time. And one important point that we have in the training program is actually to talk with the health visitors about, never start using an early identification measure if you have not thought through what you can offer the families. I think there's a story about London City where they started using the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale at one point for screening all women. And then it turned out that, as we know now, that 13% of them actually scored high on the EBDS, and they had nothing that they could offer them. And what was the solution? It was to stop the screening. And I totally agree on that. So I think it's really, really important that we do consider, before we start looking and identifying risk factors, so what can we actually offer the families? So actually it has meant, I showed you the card, the success card that I have, the one success card that I have, or slide, with the green municipalities in Denmark. So what the ADBB training has led to as a sort of associated positive outcome has actually been that the Danish municipalities have made a big work in clarifying what do we actually have of interventions that can support parents with young infants. But as you probably also know from your countries, at least in Denmark, each municipality can decide for themselves what they're going to offer families. So that also means, which I think is a big problem also when talking about equality in mental health, is that you can have very different possibilities in the different municipalities of Denmark. So actually it's the postal code where you live that, to put it in a sort of a rough way, that decides a child's future, if you ask me. Put it in a rough way. So of course it's really important before you, when health professionals start looking to identify risk factors, that they also have plans for what to do afterwards. And as you know, what we did in the Copenhagen Infant Mental Health Project is that we offered the COSP program to these moms and infants and with their partners. And that was compared to Care as Usual in the city of Copenhagen. And Care as Usual in the city of Copenhagen could even vary across Copenhagen, because Copenhagen is a very big city, as you know, big at least in a Nordic sense. And there are 5 areas in Copenhagen, and they do not do the same things either, which, is a mess when you do randomized controlled trials. But anyways, so everybody had an offer, but it varies. So what we found in the Copenhagen Infant Mental Health Study was, of course, that COSP it should not be the primary choice for postpartum depression, at least. So when you ask me when the ADBB turns out to be above cutoff, what should we do? I can't tell you at this point what the best program is. It could be the ABC, it could be the VIP program. But also, again, it's important to say that when you have a high score in the ADBB, you have to repeat it to make sure that it is social withdrawal. and then you should, the child should maybe also go through further examinations. So that would be my very long, sorry for that, answer to that.
Thank you, Mere. I guess the next question may be aimed to Nina. It's which method is better to get parental equality in childcare and upbringing, so including the non-birthing parent, for example, through law and regulations, or through flexibility and education? So should we mandate these inclusion of both parents, or should we just try to elicit it through information and increased knowledge?
I think there's a great importance in using both. Well, we have lots of these incentives for equal parenting with the shared insurance for the parental leave, and that makes difference. So we know that makes difference, but of course you need to meet the parents where they are, because parental inequality can look very different in different regions and different cultural backgrounds and in different families.
Right. So you could maybe say that either one is necessary but not sufficient in
definitely.
On its own.
Definitely.
Right. So the next question is not marked to a specific presenter, but it's how does the program work with screening for autism and developmental difficulties? Probably for you, Mere.
So I can't answer that in regard to Denmark. What I'm at the current time, but what my vision is, of course, is to. So actually, the Tryg Foundation is my best friend. No, not necessarily, but they give me money for also looking at. So that's why they're my best friend. They gave me money recently to look at the ADBBs in all of the municipalities using the ADBB in Denmark now, and not just Copenhagen. So my vision is to, so as you have in Sweden and Norway and all the Nordic countries, we have these very nice registers of a lot of stuff. And we also in Denmark have a register of child diagnosis. So my hope is, of course, that in the future, when the kids get a little bit older, so they have, a few more years, we will be able to combine these early ADBB observational measures of the infants across Denmark and see how it correlates with diagnosis later on when the kids are older. And in that sense, we will know much more about the predictive validity, of course, of the ADBB in regard to specific diagnosis. My expectations, and it has been shown by the developer Antoine Guidny, that high scores on the ADBB may be reflected to autism spectrum disorders.
Thank you. Hans, a question for you here is that it seems some components of ABC could be useful for all parents in a universal setting and not just for at-risk parents. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's a very good question. I definitely think so. As a what's the term, non-birthing parent myself, I have definitely used some of the concepts from ABC in my own life. So I definitely think there's a lot to be gained from it. I think maybe the challenge of using it, because then it would be maybe using it on a very large scale, would be that it requires quite a lot of, as I mentioned in presentation, capacity or generally just work from the people who will deliver that program. So I think maybe the challenge of using it on a very large scale would be that it requires so much resources in training and all these things. But I definitely think that the main aims and the concepts could definitely be used by all parents, and maybe even like an adapted form of ABC could be useful for many parents. But also, then again, I'm just considering this as I go along. I also think that maybe a challenge would be also that you would have these things like frightening behaviors that are obviously it's presented in a very clever way in the ABC, so that you're not really creating distance by mentioning these things. But if I'm going to be critical, I think maybe a risk would also be that it's since it is aimed at parents in risk or children who have experienced some sort of adversity, that maybe some parents may not feel that it's appropriate for them in some cases. But then again, I think so many other things in ABC can definitely be used by all parents.
Right. So maybe an adapted version or as a psychoeducational tool or something. Not
Yes,
not
maybe.
the full,
But then again, it wouldn't be
right.
evidence-based anymore.
Yeah.
So then you would have to, if you were to call it evidence-based, then
Right.
do some more research. Yeah.
Right.
Sigrun, could I add a comment to that? Because one of the things that we did with the COSP and the KIMP projects, where, as you know, we didn't find any main effects on the 3 measures that I talked about this morning. But besides looking at main outcomes, we also did qualitative interviews with both the moms and the dads who participated. And in regard to some of the things you said, Hans, about that the ABC is very much focusing on the here and now behavior of the parent. I would like to add in regard to, so this is not published, but I have some students who've been reading and doing their masters on these qualitative interviews with the moms of participating in COSP and how they experienced it as being either helpful for change or hindering for change, and how they experienced the program. And actually quite a lot of them said, and I found that very interesting, being a psychologist, they said that they thought that the COSP had too much focus on the past and on their own past and their own childhood, and that it took away the focus on the here and now relationship with their own child. And a number of them said that they actually thought that the COSP sort of digged into something and then there wasn't enough time to actually deal with it. But that digging in, and you know, the concept of the shark music and the whole, you know, you have to do this circle exercise, so what emotions were you able to share with your parents and whatnot. So a number of them actually said that this focusing on their own childhood and what it meant to their own parenthood took away too much focus from the here and now and what they actually were doing in regard to their own child. Right. And I thought that was very thought-provoking for me as a psychologist and as, you know, being very interested in attachment and psychodynamics and all that stuff. I was like, okay, so now we shouldn't talk about the past or what? But I think it's really, you know, I hear what they say, and I think it's really important to hear that message as well.
Yeah.
Can I have a comment on that?
We are shortly running out of time, and I have 2 questions that have several likes on them, so I feel responsibility to at least present them. If we have time in the end, then we can chat some more. But so maybe if you can answer rather quickly, Nina. There's one question for you. Why are there no individual health visits for each parent already during pregnancy? And what would you suggest that it would look like if you did?
Well, there's a question that I share with you. Why isn't there, right? So that's something for us to work on, but it's like sort of a split between our mother's healthcare and child healthcare in Sweden. But we hope for this to happen, definitely. And how it would look like, I think okay, so this is my dream. You have an early individual visit for the non-birthing parent, and then you have co-parenting visits during pregnancy. And then you follow up as we do, and more of that. Right. That would be great, I think.
Right. It's probably, it's a change in mentality. It takes time. We're so used to thinking that the mother is having the baby. To actually, there are two parents.
Yeah,
or
the mother
sometimes
is
more
having the
that are
baby,
having
but the
baby.
baby is having her parents.
Yes, right. However many there are. Thank you so much. And then there's a question about ADBB. Is it possible to train, and please give a very quick answer. Is it possible to train and use ADBB in other countries, or is it adapted only for Denmark?
Nope. So you can read in the report that Hans had a picture of. The ADBB has been evaluated for level 3 as well. And it's used in Finland, used in Norway, it's used in Sweden. We have trained the health visitors at the Faroe Islands. So it can be used, it's developed in France, and it's been used in many countries. So that was a short
Wonderful. Thank you. We have a lot of other questions that we probably won't have time to go through. Did you have a quick comment, Hans, or should we post another question?
I just wanted to briefly reply to what Mette said, just about connecting what she said to ABC about COSP, because we also see that it's interesting what you say, Mette, because in ABC as well, there's this one session that is especially concerned about what they call voices from the past, so that is quite closely related to shark music. And what I didn't have time to say is that some of the participants also said that one of the things they liked the least about ABC was the part where they talked about parents, their parenting, their childhood. Maybe one reason, maybe like you say, is because you don't have enough time to go into it. And it's also interesting to see that in if you see the parenting quality, the observed parenting quality over time, you see actually that it sort of flattens around the time that aspect is introduced. And that doesn't mean it doesn't actually help, but it might be that it takes a little while for the parents to grasp that concept. Maybe that's just an interesting parallel to the COSP findings.
Exactly. I think we can squeeze in one more question, which is going to be probably our final question. This is also about the ADBB. The question is, the ADBB and ASQ, SE, parental reported social emotional problems, at the same age, are they comparable? What are the pros and cons of choosing ADBB or ASQ?
Oh, I like that question because I'm so happy to be able to answer that. We will be looking into that because in the Understanding Your Baby program, we are actually asking the parents to fill out the ASQ SE. So we can compare the two measures, but I think I will warn you that I will not expect a too high correlation, as we know these are two very, very different instruments. The ASQ-SE is a parental report questionnaire. We ask both the moms and the dads, or the moms and the partners, to fill out the questionnaires, and parents can have very different views on what their child behavior actually, how they assess their own child behavior. And parents are not the best observers of their own children. And the ADBB, as you know, is a professional making an observation who's been trained and all that stuff. So it's two very, very different instruments. And already by saying this, you can hear that my expectations are not too high in regard to how much they actually will correlate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you to everyone in the audience and throughout the world on the internet. Thank you for a great conference. For those of you who are in the room, we have some refreshments and live music waiting outside for you for about an hour, just to mingle and relax after a long day. We hope that those of you who are not with us here in person can do something fun and relaxing for the remainder of the day. Thank you.